Welcome to the 1% Club, where we talk about small changes that have a real impact every episode. Today, I'm so lucky to have a guest on who will share their experiences. It's still the same mission, though. We're keeping it simple by focusing on how we can keep learning and improving. I can't wait for you to hear from them. Let's go. Shourya, thank you again for joining and taking the time. I know it's a little bit late for you, but for anyone who's listening or watching and they don't know who you are, could you give us a brief introduction to yourself?
Yep. Hi, Kiran. Firstly, thanks for having me in here. Myself, Shourya Ranka. I am a senior engineering manager with the Economist Intelligence, which broadly is a part of the Economist group. Uh, Myself, I'm a developer, I'm a tech lead, and a manager as well. So I'm wearing different hats at different points in time. But I think my focus across all these multiple roles that I take care of is to ensure that we build efficiencies and we build smarter products. I am primarily, I used to call myself a web engineer, but I think over a period of time, I think I'm like we are all are people who are kind of solutioning, and yeah, we are looking for smart solutions. Outside of work, I am not just a cricket enthusiast, but a cricket fanatic. I'm following every single game, running around the world. So yeah, that's what I am.
Amazing, amazing stuff. I'm sure we'll get into the many hats that you wear in a bit. Um, I've been running a couple of introductory questions, icebreakers, if you were. So let's jump into those. So the first one is, if you could master any skill, one random skill, doesn't have to be career related, what would it be?
I would really love to, be excellent at productionizing podcasts. As I said, I'm someone who is a real cricket enthusiast. I've been following a lot of cricket podcasts. I participated in a couple of them with my friends, but I really want to get at it. I really want to, build that skill of being able to, uh, share my opinions, ask people about their opinions as well, which I think you are doing a great job at. So yeah, I think this is what I, want to have as a skill.
Nice. It's a nerve-wracking thing. I'll be honest, I'm very early into my podcasting journey, but it can be a little bit daunting. But I'm looking forward to it whenever you do get to it. And the second one is, tell me something that's completely ordinary but still blows your mind.
I think I'll probably shift focus towards work here, but I think in terms of teams, I think one thing that really fascinates me is that how teams can, really end up normalizing inefficiencies. And the reason I say is that because I think I'll touch base on this, later down the road. But I think sometimes it can just be a part of your day-to-day work, and you don't realize that things creeping in. And again, it is something that often ends up in not just work teams, but I think I'll draw a lot of parallels between work, life, and cricket because they are the three key components of my life. I think I see that, teams that don't do well in the game as well have inefficiencies that they don't end up fixing. They keep swapping professionals. They would bring in additional coaches. They would end up changing things that, are very cosmetic, but they don't fix those inefficiencies in their game plans. So I think that is something that not just is in the game, but is also at work as well.
100%. And I always think that there's a lot of correlation that we can make between sports in general and our teamwork that we do in our industry, right? Because it's people related with groups of people working together. But I'm looking forward to listening into it. So, Shoria, you're going to be talking about a specific improvement that you or your team made. Please set the context. What is it that you wanted to improve, and what was the impact that it had, mate?
Okay, so I think it takes me back around 8 years now, 8 or 9 years now. And I think this was the first time I had started to lead a team. And I think for me at that time, the team was like it was a fairy tale like large enterprise setup, cross-functional teams, front end, back end, QA engineers, infrastructure specialists, all working together, sprint after sprint. Uh, and one thing that we had was, we weren't failing. Like, we every sprint you would see we have met sprint goals, some bugs here and there, but we are fairly there. Client is usually aligned to what they got, what they expected. Uh, and I thought I was doing well because as early as in my team leading career, I felt I was doing well, and that's where I think one of my mentors stepped in and asked me a very crucial question, right? What is it that you guys are improving on? I think that was the biggest gap that I understood at that point, that we were doing well, like we were consistent, but we were not improving. And I think it took me back. I had to take a couple of steps back to kind of understand what I had to change. And I think what I realized was that uh, we didn't need new processes or new tools to kind of bring in learning or bring some disruptions to show some kind of a big improvement. I think what we needed was to break down our bigger chunks of deliverables, because we always were looking at the big, like the final goal, and just rushing behind it to deliver it. I think what we needed was to really go back, break it down in a way that we could be iterative, and improve on it one after one on top of the other. So reducing the feedback loop, I think was one of the key things that we started to work on. I think what I did there was, if I become a bit more specific, was that we had we we took a step to shift left, in a sense that we asked our developers and engineers to kind of be a bit more progressive in terms of us owning the QA processes as early in the game as possible. Don't wait for for something to be deployed, you know, uh, and and again, these things might look a lot simpler, but for me to take that step 8 years back, when I was very less aware about the processes and how to disrupt those things very early in my career, I think that was a significant step that I took. When we did that, I think what it did was it made our work more visible, because I think visibility and awareness is one of the major things that lack in teams. That is what I felt, and uh, we started doing micro retros. I mean, we didn't do big sprint and retrospective where the themes were getting quite consistent. As I said, because the deliverables were quite consistent, the retros were quite consistent. I think what really helped me back is that these micro retros, the concept of micro retros really helped me a lot. uh, those 10-minute check-ins in the week, that could, or between the week, that could really help us fine tune, what we were delivering was really, really helpful. And then I think, as I said, the feedback loop got closed, because it's not a big 2 week uh, feedback loop, but it was a nice decision, nice discussion. Uh, but it also had actions associated to it. So I think that was quite useful. And I think one key takeaway for me was, I think it was a small experiment that worked. So you don't shoot for the stars every time, but you do smaller experiments that keep working. And I think that gives people that psychological safety, right? Wherein they feel safe to try out things. If you do it at a very large scale, then people get hesitant to try out, people get hesitant to fail, because it's a major deliverable. And in a very consulting, I was in a consulting company then. Consulting companies have targets for clients that they can't miss. Smaller experiments give people that space to fail and be better at it, and deliver faster at some time. So again, I think the key learning there was, we didn't do any dramatic thing. And to be very honest, nothing changed, in one sprint. Nothing changed overnight. But I think the improvements that we saw were quite continuous. Our delivery not just met expectations, it exceeded expectations. So that was one clear jump that we could see after a few sprints. So we were crossing targets, we were pulling things in and getting things done faster. We were able to bring much more value and ideas to the client in terms of the deliverables that we worked on, and it meant better ownership within the team. So ownership and accountability doesn't just sit with the leads, right? Everybody's accountable at different levels. When you do take these small steps, give people that safe space to execute smaller experiments within those, by closing the feedback loop, people, you give you that return in terms of being more showing more ownership between themselves. And again, as I said, micro retrospectives really became useful. And I think it's not a top-down push. It's not like, my manager told me to do something. I told my team to do something. I think it's more self-correcting because everybody, as they build more ownership, they kind of correct their own paths, and that's how the team auto corrects, their paths that they are working on. So I think while this was all micro, you can say micro actions, micro affirmations that we often end up doing, I think this was one thing that kind of gave me a lot of learning in my initial days of team management and tech leadership.
I think that's great. And I think I have a few questions that I want to ask, but just to hone in on the last section that you said around impact, what was the impact to you? So I know you said the impact for the team and the client was good, right? Because your delivery exceeded expectations. But you mentioned at the start, someone, I think it was a mentor, that
Yep.
asked you the question, what are you improving? And that sounds like a quite a key moment in this story. What was the impact on you personally as a person, as a lead? And in that period of time, how did it help you to improve?
As I mentioned, it was my first assignment as a tech lead, and I think one big improvement or big learning that it gave me was that I think I was kind of settling with what I was delivering. I think I wasn't pushing for improvement, or I wasn't looking at the next step. I think I was just getting satisfied. I think as soon as start getting satisfied, you stop improving. I think that question really opened up my vision in a sense that I should never be satisfied with what I'm doing right now. And I should just open up for space for improvement. I should aim for, okay, this is ticked off. What is next? And that is where you start improving. I mean, just like AI, right? It gets to a certain level of perfection and something really good kind of comes up. Uh, and I think similarly, I think for every individual, and I think for me personally, I think that stayed with me more as a learning about teams, retrospectives. This was all processes great, but I think what really stayed with me, forever was that when I personally start to feel that I've done, I'm doing well, things are getting quite stable. I think that's where I need to ask myself that what is it that I need to improve on. As soon as I ask myself that question, I start seeing those gaps which I might not be doing when I'm happy and stable and enjoying my ride around my work.
And that's where you can link it back to any team sport, right? Is when you're at
Exactly.
the top of your game, when you're winning titles or leagues, whatever it is, you get complacent if you don't look for that next step to improve, that small tweak that you need to make, right? Um, there were four things or three or four things that really stood out to me in that story. One of them was around your micro learning, which I think is really, really key, especially for the kind of work that I do, in that we don't want to have a big feedback loop. We want to have these smaller sessions, 5 minutes, 10-minute sessions where you can discuss, oh, hey, how is it going and what could we improve? Rather than just having your 1 hour retro or 2 hour retro, or however you're doing it every month or every 2 weeks. So the micro learning bit was good. And it led on to what you said around it encourages smaller improvements or smaller experiments to happen more frequently. So then the impact of those changes doesn't seem as big because you're doing them often and they're being done in a small manner. So that was quite cool. Then the second thing you mentioned was shifting QA left. And I remember when I was working in the EIU, and this is probably a little bit after your the beginning of your journey and what you mentioned. But when I joined the EIU, I switched over from the economist to your team within the EIU as a QA engineer, and I wasn't very good as a QA engineer, right? I kind of knew what I was talking about, but when it came to fingers on keyboard and writing code, that wasn't like I wasn't very good at all. I was kind of getting by off the good work that other people had done. And when I joined your team, what was cool for me was that was the first time that I had experienced an engineer who was really committed to the QA side of things. And I remember you used to work with me and you used to help me improve the test suite that I was writing. And you were invested in the work that I was doing because it was improving the quality of the product, but also it was shifting that testing and shifting that quality to the left. So it kind of coincides with what you were saying earlier about caring about quality.
Yeah, and I think in general, one thing that I mentioned, and I think that really aligns with who you are as a person. I think it's the small little components in the team, everybody having their ownership and bringing that energy in, that really contributes to where the team heads. Everybody auto correct, self correcting themselves. I think yeah, and I think what the example that you gave, I mean, the kind of energy that you brought in, the initiative of self-correcting that you also had, I think really helped us, ensuring that not only the what you mentioned from your journey's perspective, but I think it is what aligns the team as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And just to touch on the last example, it's a quite a classic one actually, but it was the first one you mentioned. You said when you're meant to ask you that question around what are the improvements you're going to make, you mentioned you had a big deliverable and you were used to having these big deliverables, but one of the improvements you made were to chunk it up a little bit. What was the benefit or the advantage that your team had for breaking down your bigger deliverables into those smaller chunks?
Yeah, I think one direct benefit was shorter feedback loop. So the smaller chunks you break things into, the quicker it gets out, the more you can say the more feedback it can attract because it's moving out faster. The other major bit was, when you have bigger chunks of work that you kind of deliver, it often can contain a lot of weight with itself in terms of the amount of time, as a client, you would say, okay, you know what, I need to do a lot of work to pivot out of this. The smaller things are, it's easy for you to pivot into different approaches, even if that means the next step would have to be a different direction, right? So if you make the first jump very far, if the first jump is very far, and you have to change directions, you have to take some steps back, look at which direction you have to move. Whereas if the steps are small, you can keep changing directions. You don't need to, stop, reassess and stuff like that. You can keep changing directions with very small steps. And I think that's where I think breaking down chunks was really efficient for us.
Amazing. So to wrap up then, to summarize what you've said for the viewers or the audience at home, the improvement that you took away or the change that you made, I think the key one was asking yourself where you could improve. And it was pausing and reflecting and thinking, okay, I'm doing quite well, or I think I'm doing okay in my role in whatever discipline it was. But I haven't asked myself the question, where could I or we improve? And that was kind of the starting point for these three or four different elements that you've mentioned. So thank you for sharing that. So the next one is around where you've got something wrong. So again, thank you for sharing this. I know sometimes it's quite a vulnerable position to be in to share where you failed. But again, if you could highlight the context, what was the company, kind of what happened, and what was the impact, positive or negative, of the situation?
Yeah, sure. So I think, and it's pretty much the very close to the timeline that I mentioned in my previous, story and anecdote. I think this is the next step in my career where I joined the Economist Group, and I, I was pretty much one of the very first people joining technology. So the teams were not as large as I was used to. I mentioned in the previous one that I was used to working with a big team of front-end engineers, specialists, infrastructure, everyone. The teams having three or four leads, and suddenly I'm in a setup which has me as the only engineer, and teams getting hired as we go along. And the road that we have to take is a digital transformation for the entire economist intelligence, and this is back in 2017, uh, where we don't have, as I said, teams is one aspect of it. We don't have a big roadmap to follow, so it's not like I would be given a roadmap on a platter and I have to just start working on it. I think what I started doing at that particular point of time was I started to look for processes. And what that meant was I looked for processes like, oh, how do we follow agile? How can I get agile into it? Or, I started looking for frameworks. Okay, both on technology front as well as on the delivery front. But as I said, the teams are not that big. See, like there are very small delivery teams, a total of 5 or 6 engineers in the initial days who are just plotting their way of what digital transformation would even mean for EIU. Now, in that process, in your mind, you have suddenly stepped away from looking at deliverables, but you have started to look at processes, trying to, create a bigger picture of what it would have been with, say, a 20 or 30 engineer team, with what is there in the what you have is 5 engineers, right? And suddenly, as I was looking for an optimized structure, but I was not looking for people. I think that's where at least I fell off in terms of grasping that the essence of being able to move fast. Because when the teams are small and you have a big road to achieve, you don't look for processes, you don't look for bigger efficiencies. That will come down as a part of a byproduct, but you don't look at it as the very first step. The first step is to take, to implement, to start working, and not build a city for 5 people. You build the first house for those 5 people to live in. Now, instead of improving things, like what happened was, instead of improving my ecosystem, what I ended up doing was I was kind of constraining myself and the team. Because if you are asking a team of, say, if you are a team of 6 people, and I start talking about processes, retrospectives, okay, and the team ends up spending more time in these meetings, or putting things to structure than actually doing things, people feel constrained, right? Because it doesn't fit the right value. And again, what I proposed, the initial adoption was quite low, and like sometimes I felt people were quite disengaged, and I think it left me for a lot of retrospective of why I was doing it, or am I doing the right thing? And when you start doing it in a new organization, you start to question your own skills. Am I just not being able to communicate it? Are people not getting it? Uh, am I a right culture fit? I think those kind of questions start to creep in into you. So what I learned at that point of time, and I think again, every time you run into some certain kind of problem statements, there's one person or one mentor who kind of asks certain things to you, and then you start pivoting, right? So I think what I learned at that point from the feedback then I got, I sat down with the team. We had a new chief digital officer join us, and then she was really well articulate. So Sharon Cooper joined, and Sharon Cooper was really articulate in terms of how she, used to present her views, how she used to lead teams, and she gave me a lot of correction points. What I was maybe mistaken at, or what I was expecting from this role, or from the teams that I was working with. And as we were hiring more people, uh, was that I was looking for perfect systems, and teams, don't need perfect systems. Like, irrespective of size, whether it's a 5 or a 50, teams would not need perfect systems. Teams would need evolving systems so that they can respond to their needs. It can respond to their, complaints in retrospectives, what doesn't work. It actually addresses that. You can't fix the system first and then start, applying it on the teams. The teams drive the systems. So I think that was one key learning that I had. And change, and I think when I joined and I was trying to force change, uh, whereas, because I think that is what I had, I'd been following certain practices. There was a certain way of working, and again, that was my first switch of cultures. So I think I was trying to, enforce certain things that I had learned. So unlearning was a very good learning for me as to how you fit into different pieces of puzzle. I couldn't be the same shape in a different puzzle. So I learned how to unlearn certain things and get, mold myself to adapt to teams. It's because, again, teams co-create. They don't Things don't get imposed on them. We all start to build our own set of processes, our own ways of working. So I think that was a very key learning. And I think there are no perfect plans. Like, if I step into a particular role thinking, this is what I'll execute over the next 6 to 8 months. I don't have a plan to, I don't have I have a vision, and I have a fixed plan towards it. Those don't work. Yes, you align on a vision with the team, and then course correct, as I said, smaller steps that help you change direction, leading to a certain goal, but you can't be very fixed with your plans. So I think that was that was, I think, one of the very key learnings. As I said, I ended up doing a lot of mistakes as a part of my initial onboarding, a lot of expectations that I didn't match, that didn't match to things happened that didn't match my expectations. But at the same time, I think it came up with loads of learnings. Uh, and I think, as I said, it took a lot of people to give me advice, give me that feedback that was required to be able to then transition into the roles that I am in as of today. But yeah, I think that initial failure really helped me shape a lot of my ideas around the different sizes of team and not that one size fits all.
I think that's such a great story, and I'll be honest, I've made that same mistake countless times, right? It's you, and I really like that you was in one culture, one way of working with big teams. You went to a different organization, a different culture, and there was ambiguity there in terms of how you wanted to work. And I love what you said. You said, I don't need to build a city for five people, right? You go house at a time. And it was really key in what you were saying in that you went to a framework straight away rather than looking at the people. And I think that's a mistake that loads of people in my profession make. I've made it countless times. Um, what what was the impact on the team at that point? So I think you touched upon it slightly. You said they may get disengaged or they were getting disengaged slightly when the focus was on processes initially. Was there any other kind of behavioral traits or challenges that you faced within your teams in those early days before you started to evolve?
I think one of the key things that was happening, like again, as I said, uh, I wasn't at a leadership role when I joined in. So it wasn't like, they had to accept what I'm saying and, they just follow what I say. So and neither was I the most junior person on the team. I was a mid experienced person, which meant that, I had a blend of experiences with different levels of people that I interacted with. And more importantly, as I said, I was one of the first to be hired in India, which meant that not only was it a difficult task for me to, from a process and team standpoint, it was a cultural change as well. So what that meant was I had to ensure that and again the kind of impact my team had was they felt that cultural difference. I think they felt that probably I was not a good fit in that role, and maybe I might just be technically a good fit for the role, but may not be a culturally good fit. uh, but I think the other contrary part to it was I really saw some people, and now that I think back in retrospective, I really saw people making effort to work with me. I think one of the key traits of a good engineering profession, in good professional in general, is that how easily can you blend into a team without the team having to make efforts to, fit you in. I think it was the latter that was happening. The team had to make efforts to make me fit in. And I think it was good for me that, I was able to evolve quickly. Otherwise, things may not have worked very well, because if others have to work really hard to get you, make you fit in that bigger picture, then that's not the right space to be in. I think the biggest learning for me was that, you know, because of that particular feedback, from then on, I think it has helped me ensure that whichever team I get into, I'm able to fit that team and adapt to the team rather than asking, say, the entire company to make efforts to make me fit in. So I think, I think that was one, bottom line that I saw the team, facing issues, and a feedback that came out for me.
Amazing. And you said something, you touched upon it there, Nick. You said we're not striving to get a perfect system. We're looking to evolve, right? And I think that's the same for absolutely everyone on the teams. We have to evolve to be able to work together because no two environments are the same, right? Um, thank you. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk about where you failed, and also sharing the improvements that you made earlier on as well. Um, that's it. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think sharing that was, and I was sharing that with you. I think I recalled another, really good parallel that we talked about in terms of continuous feedback. So I think March and April is generally a good time to talk about performance reviews, and we have done those recently in orgs. A lot of our listeners would have done that with their managers, or managers would have done it with their reports. I think one thing that I kind of it strikes me with this very theme of continuous feedback, smaller steps, is that I think performance reviews are a similar story, right? Uh, Performance reviews are something that uh, you know are not they are not validations, uh, or they are not a reactive evaluation of something. It's a result of the continuous feedback that you might have given to your report, or you have taken from your manager or from your peers, that eventually leads up to a final outcome in the form of a performance review. The reason I say that is because it's very hot off the cakes in terms of having done it in the last couple of days. And I think as I was speaking to you about the smaller steps, it really clicked me that uh, in teams, we talk about health checks. In performance reviews, we talked about continuous feedback. And in whatever we spoke today, we talked about smaller steps. Everything has so much synergy inside it, right? So everything that we kind of do at work, or in different steps, has so much synergy in terms of ensuring that you do those smaller experiments, close back feedback loops, and ensure that success is not just a one-time activity, or a big leap shooting for stars kind of a thing. It's like you keep progressing till you reach a goal, and then on that and then ask your question, what I need to improve on, so that the once you've reached a goal, you spot for the next one.
That's it, 100%. And that's a really good way to look at the performance review. I haven't had one for quite a few years now, but when I remember having it, it was a once and done kind of thing, right? You get to the performance review, and then it's, have you done X, Y, and Z, yes or no, and then you either do get a promotion or you don't, right? Or something in a similar vein. But what you kind of said is actually that's just a checkpoint to review all of the improvements that you've done throughout the year. And if it's pitched that way, and if it's set up that way, I think the performance review would be far less daunting. And it's more of a, hey, actually, how are you progressing with all these improvements that you were going to do throughout the year? Um, so it was a really good take. And I agree, there's lots of synergy in taking small tips, taking small steps as we go along, right? Amazing. All right, cool. Let's wrap it up there. Thanks again, mate.
All right, thanks, Kiran.